Hey Vorthos Army, so I've been here bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. So, we've been sitting on some juicy news lately, the next few sets for MTG, and no surprise, we're making our second and even third pass to some of these returned planes. One of these, actually the next plane we're set to return to, is called Theros Beyond Death. Damn, this spice is really hot today, guys. Today I'll do my rundown on predictions for our return to Theros, what I think we'll see, and what I'd like to see coming from our round 2 with some of the most notable gods in MTG. I returned to Theros, a plane I freaking loved to no end, guys. It was colorful, fun, with interesting and plentiful gods, 16 in total, each unique, with a story that was super intriguing, that pitted Ajani and Elspeth against would-be gods and actual gods that resulted in a somber but meaningful death. It was basically all that War of the Spark wasn't, and I hope our return brings us back to a story worth following. Before I speak on my predictions for Beyond Death, let's step just before death and recap the story of Theros. The main line of story dealt with Espeth Tirel becoming the champion of the sun god Heliod. Even though she was loved by the people, her hubris left her blind to a growing scheme by the enemy of the set, Xenagos, a satyr planeswalker looking to spit in the face of the gods. His plan? Become a god just so he can laugh at them on their level. Gods on Theros aren't permanent constructs, but are actually born. They're born out of favor, i.e. the mechanic from the original Theros set. If enough mortals believe in an aspect of the world, it'll give rise to a new god of the pantheon. So Xenagos wanted to be seen as a god, the god of parties. Really, he wanted to party his way to godhood, but for that he needed a rager of all ragers. He staged a massive conflict between Minotaurs and a city Elspeth was protecting, of course leading to Elspeth and the city's triumphant victory, and a celebration to match. With all that getting down, Xenagos ascended to Nyx, the realm of the gods, as the god of revels, and he'd go on to be invited to every frat house on Theros. His partying days would come to an end though, as Elspeth was set to bring Xenagos down by the Fun Police, aka the sun god and the most powerful god in the pantheon, Heliod. He falsely believed Elspeth, his own champion, was complicit in the satyr's scheme and demanded she do right by Theros. Elspeth, being the goody two-shoes she is, of course complied and gored the god Xenagos with a badass spear named Godsend. Heliod, however, wasn't satisfied. Learning that Elspeth was a planeswalker like Xenagos, he became jealous and a little frightened of her abilities. While still being salty about the whole spitting in the face thing, Heliod stabbed Elspeth with her own weapon, killing her and sending her to the underworld of Theros. Ajani, having learned what a douchey god Heliod could be, then went on a media blitz, basically calling Heliod out for his BS, hoping to injure his reputation and lead to less followers and his eventual demise. Of course, he would eventually leave to do Kaladesh, join the Gatewatch, and go round 2 with Nicol Bolas. But hey, at least now he has a chance to return to continue his PR campaign against Heliod. Oh, and the planeswalker Ashiok was here too, doing nightmare things and tormenting the now deceased Dak Faden, but yeah, that didn't really turn into much. So with this background and the title Beyond Death, we gotta think, this set is gonna be all about the underworld of Theros, the realm of the dead ruled by the Black Lion god Erebos. This is where we last found Elspeth, making a deal with the god of death himself. I believe Elspeth and this deal will be the central theme for Beyond Death. We have already confirmed by Mark Rosewater that the set will not include all original gods from the previous sets on Theros, which makes a lot of sense. There's only one big set per block now, and just not enough mythic and rare slots for all the gods. So rather than giving us all the gods, they'll focus on a few gods and their conflicts. No other gods really have that much beef, or are more relevant than the god of the sun and the god of the underworld. That's right guys, it's gonna be Heliod versus Erebos. Now, when Elspeth made this deal with Erebos, the conditions were kept secret on purpose, but we know what Elspeth got. Her love that she fell for on Theros, Daxos, who she accidentally killed because PTSD is a thing, would be freed from the underworld and restored to life, while Elspeth stayed in the land of the dead. Now, typically this would mean you'd become pretty bitter, most dead people are anyway, but Elspeth didn't become a vengeful ghost or spirit or mindless zombie. Being a strong character with plot armor, Elspeth has remained basically the same in the underworld, meaning she's ripe for a rescue, which I predict will be a massive plot of Beyond Death storyline. There are those who do escape from the underworld. It's actually a pretty common occurrence on Theros. Daxos did it through the deal between Erebos and Elspeth, but even regular people can leave so long as they again make a deal. This time the deal is really with the god of passages, the ferryman to the underworld, Theros. In the underworld, the dead are given a clay mask to represent them as their afterlife. If they smash this mask and make a new one out of gold and agree to lose all memory or recollection of who they were in life, they can return as basically humanized zombies known as the Returned. They're hollowed out people with no pasts, just feelings of loneliness and longing, with no ability to form any new long-term memories. This is why Daxos' return is so memorable, as he's able to remember and long for Elspeth, his love. So let's get down to predictions. Prediction number 1, Elspeth will not come back as a Returned. I do believe Elspeth will be coming back to the story, but not through this method. The idea of a black-white aligned Elspeth as a Returned, a zombie come back to the world of the living with all of her same motivations, traits, and beliefs is appealing, but very unlikely. While she could take this route, she's too important of a character to become basically undead and unable to planeswalk, as only living beings can truly planeswalk, and I don't think we'll get our first zombie planeswalker here. Oh, and if she's set to join the Gatewatch, well, we already just got a black and white aligned planeswalker in Kaya. So if she's looking to be a zombie to push out a ghost assassin, well, I just don't think that likely. Much more likely is the intervention from her friend Ajani Goldmane, who could venture into the underworld and rescue her soul from Erebos. But what I think will actually happen is that this deal she made with Erebos will finally be revealed, and we'll know exactly what Erebos got out of it. In exchange for Daxos returning, I believe Erebos wants the help of Elspeth to take down Heliod. Now, these two gods have some major beef, as Heliod actually created Erebos, with the sun casting the first shadow, and that shadow becoming Erebos. Sun is life, and the shadow of that life is, of course, death. Yeah, poetic. Anyway, Heliod shoved Erebos into the underworld rather than accepting him into Nyx, along with the rest of the pantheon, so there are some major grudges going on between these gods. As we imagine, most of the story will take place inside the underworld. I can see Erebos putting Elspeth through trials to become his champion, just as she did under Heliod, but now Elspeth has a motivation and a goal to work towards, returning to life to avenge her own death, and to be with Daxos. Erebos' motivations, however, are a little more nuanced. Sure, he doesn't like Heliod for throwing him into the crawl space of Theros, but while most gods are super petty, Erebos doesn't seem to operate like that. In a few visions, Gideon, who is a native of Theros, had of Erebos, and even in an encounter he had with the god when he was younger that resulted in the deaths of all his friends, Erebos isn't just the representation of death, but the arbiter of truth and accepting one's fate, coming to terms with reality, essentially. Erebos sees Heliod as the biggest opponent to the truth on Theros, deceiving the mortals for favor and building up this false image of his godliness. I'm sure Erebos would love to show Heliod and the mortals of Theros the truth, the bloodthirsty, petty flaws of the gods. Thus, this set really is about Heliod versus Erebos, with the god of death actually being the good guy in this fight. Heliod of course doesn't want a challenge to his rule as head honcho of the Pantheon and would push hard against Erebos and his new champion, thinking she was probably gone for good and desperate to keep her secret locked up because the truth of her story, well, it's pretty damning. The defeat of Xenagos and the savior of Theros is rewarded by Heliod with a spear in the back? That would certainly spell demise for the god. Once out of the underworld, not cursed as a returned, Elspeth will join with Ajani and fight against the monsters loyal to Heliod as well as other allied gods, joining with possibly friendly gods in this massive plane-wide conflict, resulting in the people's descent of Heliod as the truth of what happened rings out and he falls from godhood. Now, another prediction I'd like to address with Theros Beyond Death is the white god in the room, the end of Heliod and the birth of a new sun god. Now, one character thrown around is, of course, Gideon Jorah, a native of Theros who died heroically on Ravnica against Nicol Bolas in the War of the Spark. Because of his character and his heroism, it can be said he would make a great new god of the sun, right? But there's a few issues with that theory. The first being he died on Ravnica, not Theros. We don't know if souls can really travel the multiverse and appear on their native planes, so in that, there isn't really a plot device to get him to Theros, but more so, as gods are born out of belief and devotion, no one on Theros really knows of Gideon and his deeds. So how will he even have enough support, as a spirit mind you, to become a god? And before anyone mentions about spirits traveling through the blind eternities, I just want to mention that, Elspeth died on Theros and she didn't return to her native plane, so I don't even know if that's possible. I think Gideon's character is just going to be done with. His story had a satisfying enough end, and there's no real reason to basically resurrect him this soon. I will say, Gideon and Erebos had a lot of beef, and the event in which Erebos killed his irregulars and set Gideon down the road feeling like he needed to protect everyone was a massive motivating event for his character. But the truth Erebos wanted Gideon to admit to himself seems to be something that'll just be lost to the story. Unless in our return, maybe Ajani kinda asks about that, but that'll be basically it. So in short, no, I don't think Gideon is gonna come back in Theros, or be involved in the story or become a god. Although I can't say for sure if new gods won't form on Theros in the set. And those, you guys, are just my predictions and really just my wants out of a story of Theros Beyond Death. I really believe that this is how Elspeth will return to the story, take the mantle of the White Planeswalker of the Gatewatch and lead us to new planes and new stories in the future. If you guys have your own predictions or wants out of Theros Beyond Death, let me know those in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, support the channel by leaving us a like, subscribing, sharing, and hitting that bell so you never miss a new video. As always, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, or Beyond Death, see ya!